Most people believe their future is shaped by the decisions they make. And that's true, but only partially, because there is another force influencing your life every single day. A force so subtle, so ordinary, that most people never notice it, until years have passed, until opportunities have disappeared, until they wake up one morning and realize they have become someone they never intended to be. And that force is the people around them. Jim Rohn once said, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." At first, it sounds like a simple observation, maybe even an exaggeration. But the older you get, the more frighteningly accurate it becomes. Because the people closest to you do not merely occupy your time. They shape your standards, your beliefs, your habits, your expectations, your identity, and eventually, your destiny. The terrifying part is that this process happens quietly. Nobody announces it. Nobody warns you. It happens through ordinary conversations, ordinary evenings, ordinary routines. The people you laugh with, complain with, work with, eat with, spend weekends with, gradually become the voices inside your head. And one day, their limits become your limits. Their fears become your fears. Their excuses become your excuses. Their ambitions become your ambitions. Or their lack of ambition becomes yours. That's the hidden danger. Human beings are far less independent than they like to believe. We imagine ourselves as self-made, rational, autonomous. Yet behavioral psychology reveals something uncomfortable. Most of our thinking is borrowed. Most of our beliefs are inherited. Most of our standards are absorbed from our environment. We don't become what we want. We often become what we're surrounded by. And if that thought makes you uncomfortable, good, because it should. Think about the last 5 years. Not your goals, not your plans, your actual life. Who have you spent the most time with? What do they talk about? What do they complain about? What do they believe about money, success, relationships, discipline, growth, responsibility? Because whether you realize it or not, those conversations are shaping you. Every single day, there is a reason some people remain stuck for decades. It isn't always intelligence. It isn't always opportunity. Sometimes it's proximity. They're standing too close to people who reinforce stagnation. And eventually stagnation begins to feel normal. This is one of the cruelest psychological traps in existence. Because normal is powerful, incredibly powerful. Human beings adapt to whatever surrounds them. If everyone around you complains, complaining feels normal. If everyone around you avoids responsibility, avoidance feels normal. If everyone around you settles, settling feels normal. And what feels normal rarely gets questioned. That's why so many people spend years trapped inside lives they secretly dislike. Not because they chose mediocrity, but because mediocrity became familiar. And familiarity is seductive, especially as we age. Because familiarity feels safe, predictable, comfortable. Yet comfort often disguises danger. Some of the most destructive environments don't feel toxic. They feel normal. That's why people remain there. A group of friends who constantly mock ambition. A workplace where negativity dominates every conversation. Relationships built entirely around gossip. Families where growth is viewed as betrayal. At first, these environments seem harmless. Then years pass, and nothing changes. Not your income, not your mindset, not your confidence, not your future. Because growth struggles to survive inside environments committed to staying the same. This is where many adults experience a painful realization, especially in their 40s and 50s. They discover that some relationships have quietly become anchors, not because the people are evil, not because anyone intended harm, but because not everyone grows at the same rate. And sometimes the hardest truth in adulthood is this: you can love people deeply and still outgrow them. That realization carries enormous emotional weight, because loyalty matters, history matters, shared experiences matter, but your future matters too. And eventually a difficult question appears. What happens when the people you've always known are no longer helping you become the person you're trying to be? Most people avoid answering that question because the answer is uncomfortable. Growth often creates distance, not intentionally, not cruelly, naturally. As your standards change, your conversations change. As your mindset changes, your interests change. As your goals evolve, your relationships evolve. This is not arrogance, it's reality. A person obsessed with improvement sees the world differently than someone obsessed with comfort, and eventually their paths begin separating. This is why personal development can feel lonely, very lonely. Nobody talks about that part. They talk about success, discipline, achievement, but not loneliness. Yet loneliness is often part of transformation, because before you find your new environment, you usually lose your old one. And that period in between can be incredibly difficult. You start noticing things. Conversations that once entertained you now feel repetitive. Complaints feel exhausting. Excuses become impossible to ignore. You begin craving deeper discussions, more meaningful relationships, more purposeful interactions. And suddenly, you feel different, not superior, different. That's an important distinction. Growth is not about becoming better than people. It's about becoming better than your former self. But even positive change can create isolation, especially for men. Many men suffer silently during this phase. They feel trapped between two identities: the person they used to be and the person they're trying to become. Their old environment understands the former, not the latter, and so they walk through life carrying a strange loneliness, surrounded by people, yet misunderstood, connected, yet disconnected, present, yet unseen. This silent struggle affects millions, more than most realize, because transformation is rarely celebrated while it's happening. It's usually questioned, resisted, misunderstood. People often become uncomfortable when you start changing, not because they dislike you, because your growth forces them to confront their own stagnation. And that creates tension, a tension few people know how to handle. This is why Jim Rohn's quote is deeper than it appears. He wasn't merely talking about friendships. He was talking about influence. And influence is everywhere. The books you read, the videos you watch, the conversations you consume, the people you follow online, the environment you expose yourself to daily. All of it is shaping you. All of it is programming expectations. All of it is quietly constructing identity. In modern life, this matters more than ever, because most people spend hours each day surrounded by invisible influences: social media, news, entertainment, algorithms, and many never stop to ask, who am I becoming because of what I consume? That question may be one of the most important questions a person can ask. Because environments don't merely affect behavior, they affect possibility. A person surrounded by growth begins believing growth is possible. A person surrounded by discipline begins believing discipline is normal. A person surrounded by purpose begins seeking purpose. Possibility expands through exposure. That's why extraordinary people often seem ordinary to each other. They normalize excellence, and normalizing excellence changes everything. The opposite is also true. Normalize excuses long enough, and excuses become identity. Normalize negativity long enough, and negativity becomes personality. Normalize mediocrity long enough, and mediocrity becomes destiny. The frightening part is that most of this happens unconsciously, day by day, conversation by conversation, year by year, until one day you look around and realize your environment has been writing your future without your permission, without your awareness, without your intention. But here is the good news. Awareness changes everything. The moment you recognize influence, you regain power. You begin choosing your environment more carefully. You become protective of your attention, protective of your mindset, protective of your future. Not because you're judging others, because you're finally respecting yourself. And self-respect changes standards. You stop asking, "Who likes me?" and start asking, "Who helps me grow?" You stop asking, "Who is familiar?" and start asking, "Who is healthy?" You stop asking, "Who keeps me comfortable?" and start asking, "Who challenges me to become better?" Those questions transform lives. Not immediately, gradually, the same way negative influence works. Slowly, quietly, consistently. This is one of the greatest lessons of adulthood. Life is rarely transformed by one dramatic moment. It is transformed by repeated exposure, repeated thoughts, repeated standards, repeated conversations, repeated influences, which means every day you are becoming an average of the ideas surrounding you, the standards surrounding you, the people surrounding you. The question is, an average of what? Because time moves whether you're intentional or not. Years pass, hair turns gray, children grow older, opportunities come and go, and eventually everyone becomes the product of what they repeatedly allowed into their lives. That realization can feel frightening, but it can also feel liberating. Because if influence shaped your current reality, new influence can help shape a new future. New conversations, new books, new mentors, new environments, new standards, new possibilities. This is where hope begins. Not through motivation, not through wishful thinking, through awareness. The awareness that transformation often starts long before behavior changes. It starts when environment changes, when expectations change, when identity changes, when you begin spending time with people who remind you of what's possible, people who challenge your excuses, expand your thinking, strengthen your discipline, raise your standards. And perhaps that's what Jim Rohn was trying to teach all along. Your life is not merely a reflection of your effort. It is also a reflection of your environment. The people closest to you are either helping build your future or helping preserve your past. And perhaps tonight, after the noise fades, after the distractions disappear, after another ordinary day comes to an end, you should ask yourself one difficult question. If I become the average of the people around me, do I like where that average is heading? Because your answer to that question may reveal far more about your future than any goal you've ever written down. And once you truly understand that, you stop choosing relationships based only on comfort. You start choosing them based on growth, based on character, based on who they help you become. Because in the end, your future will not be shaped only by what you do. It will also be shaped by who you become while standing beside others. And that may be one of the most important truths Jim Rohn ever shared.